Roman Catholic, and I welcome you to my podcast. Today, my guests are Zariyi, Yusuf, and Franc Utoo. And the way this is going to work is we are just going to go ahead and um, have them introduce themselves. And then if you want to start leaving comments in the comments section, then we'll go ahead and answer them and have Franc and Zariyi answer them. And so why don't we just go ahead and get started? And Zariyi and Franc, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Cassandra. My name is Zariyi Yusuf. I I think this should be my third time on, this podcast. Fourth, yes, actually. Oh, I'm an old timer, and always a pleasure being here. I'm in Nigeria, a lecturer in Veritas University, um, man of one wife, a father, an advocate for justice. I love my people, and I'd say I offer myself in every way possible to speak the truth about what's happening to us as a people. I love Christ, and then I stand for its truth. And I appreciate this platform because it's a place where we get to let the world know exactly what's happening, with the hope that we would have lovers of humanity, lovers of Christ from across the globe that will walk with us to bring an end to this evil that has befallen, especially the Christian in Nigeria's middle belt. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Zari. All right. And then Franc, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Give the
Oh,
audience.
all right, thank you. My name is Franc Utoo. I'm a very patriotic Nigerian, a very dedicated apostle of peace and justice. I'm a knight of Columbus in the Catholic Church and a warrior for Christ, And I am from Yelwata, so I am a victim directly. I'm a survivor of the ongoing genocide of Christians in Nigeria. I'm from one of the most devastated communities in Nigeria. Currently, I'm a graduate student at the University of Central Oklahoma in the state of Oklahoma in the United States. Uh, Happily, I'll be graduating in the next 6 days on Friday, December 12th, by God's grace. I'm happily married to a very devoted wife.
Mhm.
And then I'm a father to two very beautiful children, Adrian and Nicole, who are indigenous of Yerwata. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. So before we, this for those that are just starting to join us for this live stream, please leave questions that you have. This is really just a live stream Q&A for Franc and Zari, both who have deep knowledge about what's going on with Christians in Nigeria and the persecution that they suffer. So, and that is currently happening. So before we get any questions, if there's questions that the audience has, please start leaving them. And before we do that, Zari or Franc, do you just want to give a synopsis about what's going on in the current state of what's happening? And then also anything you want to add about currently what's the situation with the US government, with Nigeria? I know, Zari, you had some thoughts on that. So do you want to take that?
Oh yeah, I think let me just put it this way. Let me say I'd be the first person to throw a question because I'd primarily be engaging Franc. I'd say something and I would hope that he would have a better knowledge of it being in the US. Around here, there's the falsehood, especially the last couple of days, where people just go online, grant interviews, and say to people that the NSA, Nuhu Rabadu's led delegation to the US, really achieved something and got the US government to be on the table with the Nigerian government. It's not exactly as if anything is going to happen the way either the US president is saying it or the senators are saying it. It's more or less US is seeing things from the perspective of the Nigerian government and has agreed to work together with the Nigerian government, sort of. So there is this false, but I don't believe it. A lot of us don't believe it because we know how much, the government here, especially the ruling party, thrives on propaganda. But it's exactly the details of those conversations or what exactly makes these, people, fellows, begin to churn out all of these lies and all of that. I don't really understand. So I thought maybe for starters, I was going to ask Franc and say what exactly took place there. Is it more or less people feel somebody understands our plight, but then the delegation went there and possibly made the US government see something else. I don't believe it anyway, but then it does seem it's the story they are bringing back to, let people know all of this falsehood, that they're actually in a partnership with the US government. I don't really know how that is. I don't believe it anyway, but I don't know what the details are or what makes them feel that way.
Frank, do you want to share your thoughts on that? Just what you have seen with the US government and what's going on with the Nigerian government and the relationship, since you've been very involved in that.
All right, thank you very much. I actually just returned from Washington, D.C. 2 days ago. And on my way back, I had a layover at Denver, Colorado. While I was at the airport in Denver, I got a call from Washington from a congressman who asked me to return to Washington by God's grace on Tuesday for an event on this matter. Now, while I was in Washington, D.C., we met some congressmen and also met officials of the Department of State at the Harry S. Truman building. That is the headquarters of the Department of State in Washington, D.C. And I want to tell you categorically that the very salty propaganda hooked by the Nigerian delegation has not really been consumed by the diners here in Washington. It has never, ever been touched yet. That meal was too salty for them to touch because these guys know the reality of what is happening in Nigeria. And so I'm very disappointed with Nigerian delegation. Instead of them to come and say the truth and ask for assistance, they came with a very heavy propaganda trying to dilute the truth of the existing reality of the genocide of Christians in Nigeria. So, unfortunately for them, the guys in the Department of State and in the Congress know the reality of what's happening. And then they also have some of us here in the United States who are victims of this genocide, who are survivors of this genocide, who have bare facts, statistics, and data of what has been happening over the years. So for whatever lies they bring to the United States, we counter such lies with greater facts. And so it goes forth to establish the fact that our government is really not serious in tackling this matter because they've been lying over it for so long and too much, So finally, I just want to tell you that it is taking them nowhere, and the United States is actually preparing something very good in quote, for us in Nigeria to help us tackle this genocide and terrorism that has been ravaging our land.
Mm-hmm. Did you see anything concrete? Like, did you get any feedback in terms of what they said that was going to concretely happen?
Okay, for the other part of it is tackled right now by the Department of War.
Mm-hmm.
Secretary of War is handling the other part of it, the other security part of it. That's Peter Hegseth is tackling that side. And then for them in Congress, they are tackling the aspect of sanctions against the government officials involved in this, visa ban, travel ban, freezing of assets, freezing of accounts, and then activating the Global Magnitsky Act that will get them arrested in other places and freezing their assets in many other places outside the United States. So that is what Congress is currently cooking. But the other aspect of tackling the violence directly is handled by the Department of War.
Okay. For those that are just joining us on this live stream, if you do have questions for Zari or Frank, please go ahead and leave them in the comments. There's a live stream comment section. So, Zari, do you want to share just your thoughts about what the response has been? Like, you're in Nigeria, so what has been the response of what's going on in the US government and what's been happening on that side?
So, well, thanks, Frank, for that update. And
Yeah.
Cassandra, while everybody expects or hopes that the Nigerian government will take advantage of this window, basically to win some form of a partnership, because I think all the Nigerian government needs to do is to demonstrate honesty. Okay, there's an ongoing genocide. it didn't start yesterday. It didn't start last year. It didn't start 5 years ago. The scale of it that is genocidal has been there for about 2 decades now. So it's not exactly as if the US is just picking it up today. We've been on the CPC list, and I'm sure as at that time, the details of what was going on in Nigeria was not actually at the disposal of the US. But ever since we ended up on that list, a lot of things have been happening. A lot of people have been following up privately, and I'm most certain that the international organizations working, people visiting, people having relatives here, people that have been helping out victims know all of these things documented. Then you have a government that primarily commits to the propaganda of lies. So, the first time I saw it and it looked funny was when people said, some people started trying to cheer the national security advisor, saying, oh, wow, he did a great job. People are saying, have him fired, when actually he led the Nigerian delegation and he managed to get Nigeria and the US into a partnership to fight terrorism. And I said, well, unless I get to hear that from an American congressman or from the US president, I won't believe it. So it looks as if it's all a fool's paradise around here, just stand the camera and tell Nigerians, hey, those of you who felt, well, the US called it the genocide, blah, blah, blah. Look at, we've won everything, okay? We're in a collaboration with them. So there is a serious sense of dishonesty, which I think frustrates whatever it is the Americans are hoping would be some grounds to get to have a partnership. Because it will take a very ungodly government to primarily commit to denying a genocide against its own citizens. I think I said this at some point, that I doubt, regardless of how corrupt the United States is, that some non-state actors could actually kill 500 Americans on American soil, and then you find the American government denying that it happened. It's not going to happen. But then when you find a country that engages in an international propaganda to tell the world this is not happening against clear evidence, it's not as if anybody is thinking of the mass graves. It's not exactly as if the pastors go there and they just ask people, lie down and let's just bury you so that the cameras will pick something up. That's not what's been happening. So the pulse around here is the government is struggling to give people the impression that, hey, cool down, everything is okay, all right? And then one of the things I noticed has been on the rise, which I think I would link to the lies the government is spreading, is that now you have people becoming bolder in advocating on behalf of these terrorists. You have people who have never been sympathetic, who have never expressed their sympathy. Basically what I'm saying is the closet extremists are beginning to come out. And they'll come out and tell you, give them school, build them infrastructure, give them ranches, allow them to do community policing, and all of these things will end. And who are the them? The people that have raped hundreds of thousands of women, the people that have raped. I was on a program last week, and I was shocked when somebody from one of the agencies of government said that yearly, linked to this kidnap and all of that, there's an average of 1 million women that suffer rape. Talking to you about because they have been kidnapped or because their community have been attacked. And I got to realize that while conservatively we try to look at between 800,000 to possibly 3.5 million internally displaced persons, he said there are over 8 million of them. The reason is because the institutes that gather this stuff actually don't cover, they just cover between 40-60% of what's happening.
Right.
And some of them just pick it up the media, but they do the work on the ground. And that is dangerous. I'm talking to you about a population that could make maybe 2-3 African countries together, internally displaced in Nigeria. And the government is just like, so it's all lies. And it has brought out a lot of extremists telling people the only option Nigeria has is to get the list of demands, these killers, do them, and then everything will be fine. And that's quite unfortunate, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Zari, for those thoughts. All right, Frank, we have a question from somebody in the chat. So it says here, what are the reasons your governor Alia, who is your governor in Benue State, where you come, in Akume, an indigene of the state, all denying Christian genocide is happening in Benue? Do you want to answer that?
Okay, I think the reason is quite simple. They just want to be politically correct. You know, there's nothing better than that. Nothing better to describe than that. They just simply want to be politically correct because the genocide happening in Benue has been sustained for over 10 years. And the good thing is that it's official that the policy of the state government of Benue was that there is genocide happening in our land. That's the official policy. So whatever Alia said, Reverend Father Alia said, he said it in his capacity as a person, in the capacity of the person of Father Alia, not for Benue. Because for Benue, Benue had a mass burial in January of 2018, where about 78 victims of Fulani jihadists were killed in my local government of Guma in 2018. And it was an official policy of the government that period where the people were buried officially by the state government, and they were buried in a mass grave at welfare quarters in Makodi. And right from that very day in January 2018, a signboard was placed, at the burial site carrying the name Genocide. Up to this very day, the signboard is there, right from 2018. It states that here lies the remains of victims of the Benue genocide who were killed in January 2018. That signboard has been there. So I consider that more as an official policy of the state government than the utterances of Reverend Father Alia. He mentioned that in his personal capacity as a man, but not, of course, for we, the Benue people, because we've been living with this genocide for so long. Yeah, I've submitted. I said they spoke in their capacity, not for us, the Benue people, not for us, because the government of Benue, as far back as 2018, has officially declared what was happening to us as a genocide. Officially. And in 2018, the government of Benue carried out a mass burial of 78 victims who were killed in one night in my local government of Guma. In Guma local, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, in Guma local government. So it was an official burial carried out by the state government in January of 2018. That is 7 years ago. And on that occasion, that very sad occasion, the government of Benue State declared it a genocide. And at the burial site today in Makodi, the burial site for these 78 victims who were killed that day in January of 2018, it was a New Year massacre because it happened on the 1st of January 2018, when people were celebrating birthday, New Year, our people, and then they were massacred in their homes in my local government of Guma, 78 of them. And so they were officially buried by the state government. So that is the policy. That is the state policy. The government was involved. The government conducted the burial. The government provided the burial site, and the government tagged it genocide as far back as 2018. The government of Benue State tagged it genocide. And up to this moment, the signboard is still there. It's still there. Victims of Benue genocide. That was what was written on the signboard. It's still there in welfare quarters, Makodi. So if the governor of Benue State today is saying there's no Christian genocide in his state, he's saying that in his official capacity as Reverend Father Alia, but not in the capacity of the government of Benue State or the people of Benue State, because we've been living with this genocide, so we don't need any other person to describe what has been happening to us.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Okay. So the next question is, what is the discussion around declaring the Sokota Caliphate a terrorist organization? It seems like going to the root of the matter. Sorry, do you want to take that one?
Now, a lot of people have been, I think that rests on maybe looking at what basically aids or enables the massacres. I think what brought the Sokoto Caliphate into the picture would come from the initial, the earlier attempts by President Goodluck Jonathan, prior to 2015 to totally eliminate Boko Haram. It turned out that one of the key people that had reservations with regards to completely eliminating Boko Haram was the Sultan of Sokoto. It is also believed that that happened because of the shared religion, and to a large extent possibly the ideology, because we had the president that took over from Goodluck Jonathan saying the war against Boko Haram, the Islamist group Boko Haram that was proscribed, is unfair to the north. The Sultan also had this reservation with regards to them being killed. And a lot of people, Islamic clerics, had this idea of, well, they may be terrorists, but they are Muslim brothers. And then we had a lot of politicians who, even though the group, that terrorist organization, openly said, this is our mission. We want scale Sharia, we want Caliphate, we want an Islamic republic. They kept making it look as if it was an economic issue. The way they still make it now, they will tell you the Fulani Jihad militia is basically doing what it's doing because of economical reasons. They don't have jobs, they don't have schools, and all sorts of lies. So when people begin to talk about that, and then with the issue of what are the names of the people sponsoring the killings and all of that, there's a natural tendency basically to look at either those who have openly supported them, like Sheikh Mahmoud Gumi, either the closet ones that are basically coming out now to begin to say to the government, look, the best way to deal with this is to give them what they want, or looking at it from the direction of those people who tend to not directly express sympathy for the Islamists, but have a problem with, the mode of operation of the government in eliminating them. So it's in three dimensions, and everybody believes that, one of the most powerful spiritual leaders of the Muslims in Nigeria is the Sultan. And he doesn't seem supportive of the elimination of the terrorists. As such, there's a big problem there. I remember the lynching of a girl called Deborah happened in Sokoto. And then the earlier jihad that, especially rocked the Middle Belt, came from Sokoto and all of that. So I think that informs the thought that is somewhere to look at. That is somewhere to look at with regards to dealing with the issue from its root cause, and all of that. Yes, but then we are waiting to see. Intelligence has been shared with Nigeria a couple of years ago with regards to those who sponsor terrorism. And locally, we have an idea about people whose use of state sort of enabled these activities to take place. And we are looking up to the government. I am very sure the Americans would have those intelligence. And I think that's one aspect that Nigeria will demonstrate sincerity coming days.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Another question. If you're just joining our live stream, if you would like to leave any questions for Frank or Zari in the chat, we'll go ahead and try to get to them. So the next question is, where do the jihadis get their weapons and money from? Who would like to take that?
Well, for many of us in Benue State, we know that there are a lot of these emirs involved, and they make so much contributions. They make contributions towards this evil cause, and of course, like we keep saying, there are a lot of government officials involved in this level of government, governors, ministers, senators, who are very well deeply involved in these killings. And so these are the people who raise funds. And of course, they also raise funds from sale of dirty minerals, illicit sale of minerals, especially the minerals in the northwest and even north central. Like in my local government in my state, there's a local government where these minerals has been exploited for such causes. That's the local government of Kwande in Benue State. So there are many avenues by which these guys raise funds. The one thing that is never lacking to these guys is obviously funds, because when you even see them, they bear some of the latest arms. At every point in time, you see all these Almajiri boys who cannot raise 1,000 naira for themselves, will be bearing an AK-47, AK-49 that cost about 3 million naira. So what is never lacking to these guys is money.
Yeah, and I think I think was it early this year? They get more and more sophisticated. I think at some point we began to hear stories of how they've started using drone technology to kill soldiers and all of so a lot of things have been happening, and they are getting more and more sophisticated. And the more they do what they do, the bolder they get, and the more normal it becomes. It's important to note that basically is where I think the issue of the complicity of the Nigerian state comes in. I said it that some of the weapons they used, even you and I can't, we don't know where to access it in the black market. Let us assume we stumbled into money. Where basically do you get the technology that could shoot down a plane? Where do you get, how do you get to access, anti-aircraft? How do you get to, so all of these things, how do we even get armed drones? So there is a lot of sophistication in their, the channels of their supplies. And I think what has made it complex is because we are not just looking at local players, local sponsors. I think they have hit into the international or the global jihadi movement. So whatever it is that funds ISIS, whatever it is that funds Al-Qaeda, is basically what funds this ones. And to the best of my understanding, I'd say the most dangerous terrorist group on earth today is the one that is active, especially in Nigeria's middle belt, in terms of their weapons, in terms of the number of people they kill, in terms of the impunity with which they do what they do, in terms of how I don't know whether to say they've made the government weak or the government is friendly to them. They do that with impunity, and it seems the only thing the government is trying to do is to explore ways to appease them.
Yeah. All right. So next question is, would ethnic and religious cleansing not be part of the conversation? Is there data on the number of villages overrun, the natives expelled, and how many of the villages have been occupied? Who wants to take that?
So on the plateau, tens of villages have been overrun. For instance, I don't live in Benue, but I visited a particular community where from the state capital to a particular location where we rescued, I may not remember the names because they are, tribal names, to a place where we got to rescue a number of women, I think about 50 of them who were cut off behind, I'd say, enemy lines one particular morning. They just left an IDP camp to go scout for food from their homes, and there was an attack. So they couldn't come back to the safe zone. They had to run into that place. I just within that local government, upper local government, I passed through 4 communities that were completely empty. When I say to you completely, I mean you can't find any soul there. You might see goats, you might see doors that were left open, you might see stores, chemists that were just left that way, classes, markets where you likely find, obviously, when you look at the market, you know maybe something going on, and then everybody had to run away. So just within that local, I passed through 4 communities that were completely empty. Frankly speaking, I don't know if the governor has has moved the people back to that location. On the plateau, I think a couple of days ago, the governor made a statement, and the place is so beautiful. You see, the thing is, it's become almost normal. What happens is when they attack communities, they don't immediately occupy them. Like the place I saw in Benue, when they attack and the people run away, what they do is they leave their scouts. Now, these scouts, to avoid being picked up either by the military and all of that, they move around as if they are grazing herds, cattle. So you see them here possibly in the morning and then in the other community in the evening, and they don't touch anybody's house and all of that. What they do is they try to see the tendency of the people to return back to their homes. And so possibly over a period of 1, 2, 3 months, they ensure that any attempt to return home, they alert the killers, they come around. If there are people that are unfortunate to get killed, they get killed, or they sack those ones until the people begin to adjust to living in IDP camps. Now, once they are able to sustain that for a number of months, at least 3 months, 6 months, then you begin to find them living in those areas. Okay, so we are talking about hundreds of communities. Frankly speaking, we are talking about hundreds across the Middle Belt, where people have been totally sacked, and then many other communities where people who are in the IDP camps will tell you, because there have been people that try to say, let us go and see if it is true that they've actually sacked this community. And somebody could actually point to you and say, that place where so-and-so person lives, or these women are living, that was where I live. And these people have been away from their homes for years. I told you I saw kids that were given back to in IDP camps. They grew up in IDP camps, they started speaking in IDP camps, and they are still there. So it's just unfortunate. We're talking about actually hundreds of communities. That's just the truth.
All right. So I just want to add that I think my friend Zariyi is trying to be, he's quite generous, by calling the figures, because that's an understatement. 100 is actually an understatement. There are thousands of these communities. Even in Benue, there are thousands. Just within Benue, I'm not talking of the ones in Plateau State, in Kaduna State, that's southern Kaduna, in southern part of Nasarawa State, in Taraba State, in the Christian Hausa communities of the Northwest, and those of the Northeast. Look, in my local government alone, 80% of my local government has been taken over by these guys. 80%. In my council ward, 80% of my council ward has been taken over. My council ward of Niev. When Yerwata massacre happened on June 13th and 14th, there were people from about 16 different settlements who were camped in Yerwata. So Yerwata itself was an IDP camp, because we are a village that is placed on the federal highway. So many of these communities felt Yerwata was secured or more secured. So because their communities were taken over, a lot of the communities surrounding Yerwata. If you go to Yerwata today, which is placed on the federal highway, point your compass either side into the bush by 2 kilometers is a community that has already been taken over. Either side, from any side you point into the bush 2 kilometers, just from 2 kilometers, not even that far, from 2 kilometers into the bush, are communities that have been taken over completely. So in my council ward of Niev in Guma local government, 80% of these communities have been taken over. And that is why we have millions of people in the IDP camp. So the fact that you see millions of people in the IDP camp explains itself. Like the law will say, in Latin, it says, res ipsa loquitur. The fact speaks for itself. So I cannot even believe in my entire life that my own sibling, the same blood with me, will give birth in the IDP camp. Will give birth. My own younger sister Mercy Utoo, Frank Utoo, my own younger sister, my father's taught to the last born. She gave birth in the IDP camp 3 months ago. And that guy, the baby has not gone out of the walls of the IDP camp up to this day. In the IDP camp, right now in Makodi at the international market in Makodi, my youngest sibling is barely 3 years old. He's been in the IDP camp for the past 6 months. He's barely 3 months old. My dad died when the guy was just 4 months old. That's my youngest sibling, Dede Utoo. He's in the IDP camp. So our lands have been taken over. For many of these other places, they are left desolate. For many others, they have been occupied. Because there are a lot of our villages in Niev Council Ward in Guma local government. When you go to Niev Council Ward in Guma, you go to Mbaye Biande Council Ward in Guma, you go to Babai Council Ward in Guma. There are a lot of these villages that were taken over, and they brought their families, their kids. Even my maternal village, the village of my mother in Makudi local government. Makudi is the headquarters of Benue State. So in Makudi local government, my mother's village is called Chebai in Baku, in modern market ward of Makudi local government. It's been taken over. So my grandfather's house in the village is occupied by these guys. The last time someone went through there, he said the graves in the graves around, some were broken, and some of the graves that have railings were being used by these guys to spread, to spread their clothes, to wash their clothes and spread it there on the railings. And then they have their kids crawling in our compound. They use our streams. They use our toilets. They use our kitchen to cook, and then they broke down some of the walls and used the stones to carve a demarcation for mosque, to carve a demarcation for mosque in the heart of our villages. So that is the reality of what we live with today.
Well, it's very sad. The whole situation is incredibly sad to listen to. I live in America and I'm from America and I've grown up in America, so it's such a different reality from America to what's going on in Nigeria. Okay, there's some more questions filling in the in our chat. So the next question was, would it be best if North and South Nigeria split into separate countries? Who would like to take that?
All right. Look, I think we've come to such a point that we have to be sincere with ourselves. You see, Cassandra, you're an American. You know that in 1787, 55 wise men sat in Philadelphia to draw the blueprint for this country. They formed a union, the then 13 states of the colonies then, drew the plan for this union, and then they drew the constitution. And because they were so sincere, that constitution, which was drafted in 1787 and adopted in 1789, has never been touched. It was amended just 27 times, the 27 amendments. And this amendment were just insertion of what was not there, not removal of anything per se. It was just insertion, of something that was not there in the Constitution. And the Constitution of America is just 4 pages, for goodness sake. Just 4 pages. The Constitution of Nigeria is like an encyclopedia. It's over 500 pages. Just saying nothing. But America, with a constitution of just 4 pages, is a working country. Because the founders of America were sincere. They sat down, they agreed within themselves to form a union. So in Nigeria, we're actually not a nation. We're just a country. Because the Fulani man in Nigeria sees the Fulani man in Niger and Burkina Faso more as a brother than a thief man who is a fellow Nigerian with him. You see, you here in America, you see the Caucasian who is an American white. He sees the American Latino more as a brother than the white guy from France. You can attest to what I'm saying. More than he sees the Latino right. American, more as his own brother than his fellow white guy who is from France or who is from England.
Well, I think
so. That is not what is obtainable in Nigeria. The Fulani guy, for instance, sees the Fulani guy from Chad from Senegal, more as his brother than a Birom guy in Nigeria. And so, look, like Obafemi Awolowo will say it. He said we are just a mere geographical expression. Nigeria. We're just a mere geographical expression because we were amalgamated in 1914 by Lord Lugard and his mistress named us Nigeria without our consent. So Nigeria really need to sit down. We've never had that kind of a conference where we sit down to define our nationhood. So we need to sit down. It is negotiable. We need to sit down and talk. Let's accept, let's agree. Because there are a lot of places, there are a lot of frictions right now. There are a lot of areas that I feel are very gray that we may not agree on, because some people want Sharia. So me, I don't want Sharia. I want a secular state. Religion should be disconnected from state, just like it is obtainable in America. State is different from the religion. So religion should be disconnected from state. Practice your religion privately. That is what is obtainable in Senegal. Senegal is 95% Muslim, but they do not have Sharia. And that is why you see that Senegal, right from independence up to date, Senegal is one of the most peaceful countries in West Africa. Meanwhile, they are 95 to 96% Muslims. But the longest serving president of Senegal, who ruled for over 30 years, was a Christian. Leopold Senghor was a Christian. You see, that is a working country, that they believe in themselves, they are building their country, they are united around a common goal, around a common purpose. But in Nigeria, you see, look, there will be a lot of crises if you say, okay, let these guys discontinue Sharia. The Nigeria of Sharia is more troubled than the Nigeria before Sharia. The Nigeria before Sharia, the Nigeria before 1999 is 100 times more peaceful than the Nigeria of 1999 to date. More peaceful, more organized, more coordinated. So there are a lot of things that, look, we differ. So we really need to sit down and talk to ourselves. If you say you want to practice Sharia, you want Sharia to regulate your life, good and fine. Please, have your own country. Have your own country and practice it. You can practice it the way Taliban are practicing it in Afghanistan. It's your choice. But for some of us, because Sharia has been the grounds by which many of these things are happening today. All these killings, all this terrorism, all this genocide. Before Sharia, there was no Boko Haram, there was no Lakurawa, there was no ISWAP, there was no Ansaru, there was no Fulani genocidal killings. But after Sharia, it gave them the template. It watered the ground for them to start all this nonsense.
Yeah. Sorry, do you want to share anything?
Yeah, I'd just say to you that the other dimension of running Sharia is the fact that it has a parasitic relationship with the Nigerian state. How do you run Sharia and then you have the Sharia police that they refer to as the Hisbah? Okay? Now, these people are not being paid by the Muslims or funds raised in the mosques. It's our taxpayers' money. So would you picture a scenario where I form some form of Christian state? The people that preach to me in church, the people that baptize me, the priests that give the sacrament and conduct worship will now be placed on taxpayers' money, placed on salaries that even Muslims and those who are atheists pay. Something doesn't really add up. So that is just one act. That's how parasitic it is on the economy. Secondly, it is a practice that would say to you, it's only restricted to us, the Muslims. But the truth is, if it's only for the Muslims, how did it get smuggled into the constitution? I think that's where the problem began, where the Nigerian constitution, where it was smuggled, look as if it had a recognition by the Nigerian constitution. You may remember, Frank, just a couple of weeks before Lakurawa emerged, before Lakurawa, one of the new terrorist group emerged, some representatives, federal representatives from certain Sharia practicing states presented a bill. And what they wanted was that the restriction of Sharia to Muslims, clause that restricts it to the Muslims, should just be removed. Let it just be a general thing, whereby now it's going to smuggle into economics of the country, politics of the country, civil service of the country. Of course, they didn't go that route. They didn't display it that way, but that the clause that restricts it to Muslims should just be removed, which simply means it will now become a general practice. So in other words, it will now metamorphose from the Sharia practicing state to basically every politician that has some measure of power at his disposal to use it to advance the cause of it. And that was rejected. That proposal was rejected. Barely a week or two after that, Lakurawa sprang up. I think I made a post in that regard. However connected those two events are, I don't really know. But just barely 2 weeks after that proposal suffered defeat in the National Assembly, Lakurawa emerged. So if there is a group of people that believe in a law that terrorizes others who don't believe in their religion and terrorizes even people in their religion who are less privileged. An example is a boy whose arms were cut off because he stole money. And then you have governors who have stolen billions and nobody is doing anything to them. So it calls to a point where you sit down. Now the question is, many people will tell you, oh, we've so integrated into each other too much to think about either random or some restructuring. But it is a lie. It's a simple matter. There are particular states that practice it. There are particular states that practice it partially because they have possibly up to 40, 50% of Christians. So you sit down along those regions, get your representatives and sit down and say, this is the kind of life we want to live. Draw up your plans and then present it to the National Assembly. And others will say, okay, since this is what you believe in, some parts of Niger, Kano, Jigawa, Sokoto, and all of that, fine. Then we sit down and look at it this way and say, okay, do we go back to regionalism? So you've got your region. If you want to belong to Nigeria, say, okay, in our region, this is how we practice it. In this region, we don't practice it that way. And then you look at the resources you have to run your region. But I think the problem comes because everybody wants oil money, Mr. Frank. Nobody wants to live. More like I see the guy that has the oil as an infidel, but then the oil is good to enter my pocket. So I don't like him, but I can't leave him. I want to dominate him and take his oil. And that basically is why I say it's a parasitic relationship. And the fact that they've already tasted it and the government has allowed for the implementation of it, I think one of the options to solve this problem is to go for a referendum, some sort of a restructuring of the country and all of that. But I hope we get to that point and do it peacefully. Otherwise, it is a certain law that cannot coexist. It's not even a matter of coexisting with Christians. It can't coexist with anybody that does not subscribe to that kind of law, even amongst the Muslims. I mean, Afghanistan would have been a more peaceful place, but look at the way they waste people's lives. Look at what Hamas started doing immediately after the ceasefire. They went back and started, anybody that looked like he was too liberal, a friend of a Jew, they called them collaborators and they were executing them on the streets. So those were Muslims doing this. So it's not exactly as if it's a law that has proven itself to be, the way Nigeria is practicing it, has proven itself to be healthy, to humanity in any way.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to take 2 more questions. So the next question says, what do you think are the factors causing the delay in the relocation of the displaced persons back to their homes?
Well, Cassandra, I'd say this to you. 2022, I was in a place called Kagoro in southern Kaduna. One of the things I noticed that, although that there was an attitude that seemed as if the government didn't even want people to know there were IDP camps. The reason is because if there are IDP camps known, it will obviously pull the national organizations, especially those that are into humanitarian war. So I went to this particular camp to deliver relief items, just little within the small funds we could pull together. So I was sent to deliver that from friends and all of that. Now, I was taken to the IDP camp and I didn't see many people. And I said, why are they not here? They said the people who should guard the place told them they won't work. They gave them a certain specification that the IDP camp has to meet. Now you can imagine an armed police officer. You can imagine a security agent of the Federal Republic of Nigeria telling refugees or telling internally displaced persons that you have to have the standard of that it needed the place. I think they said the place needed to be either fenced or the use of barbed wire or whatsoever before they could come and guard them. Otherwise, they should all find places to live with their relatives. And frankly speaking, that was what happened. I'm not talking to you about a place where 2 houses were attacked. I'm talking to you about a settlement where the houses were burnt down totally. That's people attacked, fired with guns. I mean, if you see the ammunition, you would know very well it's not some child's play gun. And they took their time and burnt down houses, killed some people, burnt down some people, and all of that. But yet they will not allow that community have an IDP camp. Of course, they didn't chase them away, but they made sure that the factors made it impossible for them to do so because they kept telling them, we can't guard you. If they attack you, you will be on your own. So when people come around to reach out to them, they gather. One of the reasons why there is a delay in returning people back to their location is because for almost 2 decades, it has been a successful operation for the jihadists to actually displace and occupy where they are bold enough to do so. Displace, occupy where they are bold enough to do so. Returning the IDPs will simply mean having to confront people that have settled in that community. And most of the time, it will have to be in an armed conflict. Maybe they have gone to the point of adopting the Hamas strategy where they may want to use women and children as shield, because usually when they come to the community, they keep them there. So they go kill people and they come back. When you meet them there, they look like ordinary people living their daily lives, but they are trained fighters. So that will require a lot of eliminating of these people. They are not peaceful people. And that's one of the things they are slacking. And then the complicity of the government, where we believe that key players amongst the government pursue it as a jihad. It is not possible that they have conquered territories and they would want to use state powers to recapture those places. So once they realize 5-10 years, the people are getting absorbed into other communities, they just let it be like that, you know. So that's one of the reasons. It's supposed to be a conquest. So you don't really expect anybody to go back and drive them away after they have fought and they have won. There's a Christian monarchy that is now an emirate in Kaduna State. We see it every day. We pass by every day. We see their pains every day. And I still see the blood. And I hope that justice will be rendered one day.
Mm-hmm. Frank, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, adopt every position of his. And the only addition I'll make here is the fact that there's also political and economic interest in keeping people in the IDP camps, because there's so much money being pumped by foreign bodies and non-profits into these IDP camps, and a lot of the government, especially in states in the Northeast, like Borno, I know this as a fact, because I have some of my friends who work there as who work in the camps on behalf of some of these non-profits, you know. So they talk about government complicity in trying to make sure that the camps are sustained, because a lot of funds have been pumped by international bodies, non-profit organizations. And so if these camps, if people are made to return back to their homes, the funding will stop. And so they are sustaining these camps for the sake of, look at the camp in Makodi, for instance. The guys there, the guys in our state emergency management agency are just benefiting so much, you know. For every $10 sent to that IDP camp in Makodi, where the Rota guys are in international market, only $1 gets to them. For every $10 that is sent, that's been, even when someone goes to the camp and donate before the IDPs, only 1% gets to the IDP. Even for clothing, a lot of non-profit, do send clothing, and then the next day the IDPs there will be seeing officials of government with the same clothes, instead of them giving it to these IDPs. I'm telling you this as a fact because the people in the IDP camp in Makurdi are my own siblings and my relatives. So they give me daily report of what's been happening.
Wow. Incredible. All right. Last question, and maybe we can end on a positive note since there's been, it's a sad situation, what's going on there. So, this person asks, Stanley Guyan 4489 said, please, how soon do you think that we will receive help from the international body? Because immediately the US designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern. Everything gets worse on a daily basis from the terrorists. So, do you want to share any hopeful news, or just even, I know Frank, you are in the United States and you're working closely with that. So, just anything that you think is concretely happening, or anything
Yeah,
to end on a positive
okay,
note.
okay. So I may not be able to give a timeline, but these guys are working on it because the congressmen are working on it. Congressman Riley Moore, Chris Meads, and the guys, and even my senator from Oklahoma. We spoke last week when I was this week rather, this week Wednesday when I was in DC, Senator James Langford, and we spoke on this same issue. They are working on it, and for the part of combating the terrorists directly, I think that is handled by the Department of War here in the United States. So they are working on it. I may not be in the position to give a timeline, but I believe by God's grace, justice shall come very soon.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, do you want to add anything?
So, to the best of my understanding and hope, I'd say soon enough. Soon enough. And like I said, I am most certain that because one of the things the government have tried to manipulate gullible people with, or the closet extremists with, that they've come out to vocal denying the genocide, is the fact that it looks as if Senator Ted Cruz woke up one morning, Bill Maher woke up one morning, just a couple of weeks ago, months ago, and just said, there's problem in Nigeria. And then the Christians who have been living peacefully decided to say, yes, we are suffering and all of that. So I believe it's something that has been documented by Americans, whether at governmental levels, whether at private levels, whether at organizational levels, that have been reaching out to people. I think the time to put an end to that evil has come. It's a dirty thing. It's a dirty thing that has been happening unofficially. It's an unofficial war, the genocide that has been on without people knowing. So I do not think the position the Americans have taken, the steps they are taking, is something. And I think a lot of times we ask those questions in Nigeria because we are so used to lip service from the government. For instance, throughout Buhari's regime, after every massacre, after every massacre, they say, like the one Frank made reference to. Once it happens, they say to you, the president condemned it and he gave a marching order to the military to bring an end to it. So Nigerians have seen a genocide where the government has been giving the military marching order for almost 20 years. So obviously we will ask that question. And that's why I said, to the best of my understanding of the Americans and the steps they have taken, I would say soon enough. And I hope that.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, is there anything else you all want to share? I know there's another question. So if you do, to the audience that has been watching, if you do have questions, or if you watch this after the live stream is over, you have questions, just leave them in the comments, and maybe for a future live stream or a podcast, we'll go ahead and get to some of those questions. But anything else, Frank and Zari, that you want to end with before we wrap up?
Mine is just an encouragement to the victims, that's the Christians of northern Nigeria, who have been victims of genocide for over 20 years, to keep the faith and keep the hope alive that justice will definitely come at the end of the day. And let's not be shaking. The fact that we've been facing this act of terrorism, this act of jihad, only strengthens our faith. And I also want to encourage the government, especially the president, to take the bull by the horn, let him go all out, because the man has been trying to be politically correct all this while. He felt that, okay, his presidency lies in the hands of these people. He knows it as a fact that he has many of these people who are involved in this killing in his government. So let him take the bull by the horn by going after these guys, arresting them, executing them, and jailing them, and giving the necessary sentence permitted by law. Because by the time we begin to shy away from this, our country will continuously go down. So the only path by which we'll step into a greater country, a greater nationhood, is when we begin to administer justice in its most right form. So peace is not just the absence of crisis, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., but the presence of justice. So for me, I want justice to be done.
Zari, do you want to say anything to wrap up?
So just a short message, and it's double-edged. One, Nigerians, the other to the Americans. One, for Nigerians, I'd say, let's stand strong. The people we are up against are out here. It's not exactly as if they are trying their luck. No. What we see today is a result of decades of a plan, especially looking at how internationally they managed to skew the propaganda to make it difficult for the victims to speak out, especially over the years. So let's stand strong, and then let's speak up. I know a lot of people are quiet. A lot of people are afraid to share their experiences. And somebody even said there are people that are afraid to share their experiences because they don't want to be spotted as the people that gave the story of what happened to their families and all of that. So people tend to live in their cages. But I think we must be resilient in order for good to conquer evil. On the side of the Americans, I'd say that the Islamists in Nigeria are out for the kill. All of this propaganda is aimed at getting the Americans off the back of Nigeria with regards to the genocide. Because as far as the jihadists are concerned, there has been a pattern where however we kill these Christians, actually the church in Nigeria does nothing. If we kill 400 of them in Benue, the church will not do anything. If we kill 300 in Plateau, the church does nothing. If we go to southern Kaduna, we waste them, and we even take out a king and we put an emir, the church does nothing. So it looks as if all we need to do is to keep the international community away and run over these people. So to the Americans, I'd say whatever propaganda, I don't know whoever leads what delegation, unless it is a measure to bring an end to these Islamists, their foot soldiers and their sponsors in high places. It's not something to work with. So I encourage every decisive measure the Americans want to take, basically to put an end to this genocide. It is very much welcome. The simple reason is because it is going to save millions of lives. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Frank and Zari, for being my guests today. And to our wonderful audience, if you do have questions or comments, you want to leave them in the comment section. Like I said earlier, we will try to get to them in a future live stream or in a podcast. And I hope you have a wonderful morning, day, or night, wherever you are in the world. And God bless you. Bye-bye.